think outside the box, if you will. I mean, go there, go off campus. Let's think this through. And sure enough, that's where the Mustang was born. When it finally hit, it took the country by storm. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Cars in Context. I'm your host, John Clor. You know, this is the Motor City, and this is the show where we put cars into the context of your everyday life. You know, we try to entertain you and give you some information, but we will make no apologies for our decidedly Detroit perspective. And that's what today's show is all about. Detroit, Michigan, the Motor City, the motor capital of the world. Well, at least it once was. And we have a real asset in this town. We have the world's automotive heritage, the city that put the world, not just the United States, we put the world on wheels. And it was all born here, but you know what? We're not leveraging it. We have the heritage, we have the history, but we're not making any money from that. So today's show is going to be about making Detroit a destination for our heritage. Destination Detroit. I mean, should we invest in auto attractions for the city? And to help us do that today, we brought on none other than Joe Babiasz.
Hi, John, good to see you again.
Joe, back again. Joe's our favorite automotive historian, our auto expert on this stuff. Joe, the Cars in Context, the YouTube video on the Packard plant has surpassed, what is it, 10,000 views?
10,500 hits as of yesterday.
When we talk about Detroit's heritage, Joe, that show you did with us on that little, who'd have thunk it that there's so much interest?
Not me, but there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interest in Packard worldwide.
Right.
I was really happy to see the numbers on YouTube.
We're going to talk a little bit today about some of the heritage and how we could leverage some of that heritage, some of the opportunities out there. But before we do that, Joe, let's find out what's happening in the news. Okay. For me on this show, I love to bring everyone into the times with what is said on the television and what the programs that are going on in the automotive world and what reality is. And one of those programs that we thought was a great deal and wasn't was the old Cash for Clunkers program. Joe, you remember Cash for Clunkers?
Yes, certainly do.
As a guy who collects old cars and restores them, I'm sure you'd hate to see a really nice restorable car go just because the government thought it was too old to be a vet.
And the dealers were required to destroy those cars. They had to destroy
they took them in on a trade.
That's right.
Yeah, don't get me started. But anyway, I'm sure most of you folks out there remember Cash for Clunkers. You know, the U.S. government initiated it back to kickstart the car sales during the Great Recession that we had, and they thought that was going to be the answer. And the idea was if you brought in a car that was older usually 10 years old or older, they thought was an old car, we'd give you $4,500, and you'd be labeled a clunker, and you'd get a voucher worth up to $4,500 on a new car. Now, around 700,000 used cars were scrapped. Participants from all over the country, and about 700,000 people received that voucher, whether or not those cars, you know, were worth whatever they were worth. And a study just now from the Brookings Institute says it really didn't help the economy, folks. In fact, overall Cash for Clunkers, it cost $2.85 billion. That program, almost just under $3 billion, folks. And it created, 3,700 jobs. But let's do the math. That's the cost of $1.4 million for every job it cost. $1.4 million for each job. And again, Joe, it's your government thinking it knows how to handle automotive business.
Right. You know, anyone would really realize or should realize that that would not bring in new additional car sales. All it did was it brought forward car sales that people were probably going to do anyhow in the near future, but they took advantage of the $4,500.
Sure, who wouldn't?
And so it didn't really increase the job, the jobs. Well, 3,700 jobs. That's a few, but $1.4 million per job. That's not a good deal. Thank you, Washington.
Yeah.
Great.
And what you don't realize, folks, is that a lot of the money of that $2.85 billion that we spent out of your taxpayer dollars, much of it went to overseas foreign automakers because they bought new. We were trading in our clunker on foreign cars, which all that profit went overseas. It didn't stay here.
Don't get me started on that,
So,
John.
well, speaking of foreign automakers, Joe, why don't you take an item here?
Okay, Toyota, they're just swimming in cash right now.
They have more money than
Toyota
Oprah.
earnings have outpaced the rest of the industry, even though they're not selling as many cars as
Now, Joe,
they were in the past.
explain this to our viewers. How is that possible?
I'm not sure. Well, we'll talk a little bit about it. I
Okay.
mean, they sold 4.4 million units worldwide in the last quarter.
Okay.
But
Which
even
is
with
not as
selling
much-
fewer cars,
It's
revenues rose 15%. Nice.
Okay.
To $114 billion, by the way. But their net profits are up 82% to $11.2 billion in profit.
Now, how do you sell
Profits are
fewer
up
cars and get more?
82%.
Wait, you're selling fewer cars. Your profit margin is hard.
Yeah, obviously it's this yen issue. It's a devaluating of the yen. They're manipulating their money, and Toyota's just raking in the dollars on fewer car sales, and we're not doing anything about it.
What have we
unfortunately.
said all this time, folks, about the manipulation of the currency of that country? First of all, it's a closed market. We don't sell any cars over there. You know, minuscule. amount.
very few.
Very few. Just a handful of cars. They've dominated our market for 50 years. Have come over here and taken huge chunks of market share away from domestic makers, and all the profit. Oh, it's made in Ohio. Yeah, but the money is sent overseas. Oh, it's made in Kentucky. Yeah, but the money's sent overseas. Oh, we got a couple of factory jobs down there. Yeah, but all the 7 supporting jobs for each factory job is overseas. People don't see it. So now that you manipulate their currency, they can make our competitive product uncompetitive by price.
Absolutely,
because
they
they
have.
manipulated the currency. And it's just, folks, it's a huge issue.
Not
That's
gonna
why.
change. It won't
That's
change unless
why.
Washington changes
Don't
and
think we're
forces
being
it.
unfair with this fair trade agreement. It's not fair. Joe, didn't you do a show called Fair Trade's Not Fair?
We did.
All right, folks, go back on the YouTube channel Cars in Context TV on YouTube. Look up Fair Trade Isn't Fair, and you'll see the real reason. This is a huge story. Really good for bringing it to us, Joe. And speaking of auto sales, let's talk about something that's selling that I really didn't think would sell. All-wheel drive models today, folks, they're actually picking up traction. You get the joke there, Joe?
I did.
Oh, thanks, yeah. Well, according to data from the research firm Polk, you know, the Polk folks, the number of new vehicles sold with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, and Lauren Parrott and I have just talked about this. Maybe we should do a class at the Warmer World to talk about what's the difference, front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, and what are you paying for, what are you getting. But it's increased. All-wheel drive cars are up 5%. Just over the last 5 years, people thought it was just a gimmick, that you don't need all-wheel drive. And, you know, Joe, I've had rear-wheel drive cars all my life. I've drive a front-wheel drive car in the winter in Michigan. Do I need all-wheel drive? I don't know that I've driven in weather so bad that I needed a four-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive. But the fact is, you know, look at the Jeep Cherokee. It has 3 different systems available in that car. And you know, almost 1 out of every 3 new vehicles sold can drive all 4 wheels. That's unheard of in this market.
But you wonder down the road when, in terms of maintenance and in terms of reliability
Right.
and cost of ownership, vehicle ownership over the 10 or 15 year period, what you're going to lose by having all-wheel drive. Do you really need it here? You don't really. I mean, for 100 years we haven't needed it, right? I mean, you know, you and I grew up putting snow tires on the back tires of our
And
cars.
I had a
every
4-speed manual
October,
V8 car.
taking the snow tires off in the spring, and we still survived.
You know,
so is it nice? Yeah. Is it necessary? I'm not convinced.
You know,
it's
don't get me
necessary.
started on this, folks, because, you know, I don't think that we really drive as well today because the technology in our cars is so well. Do we need all-wheel drive vehicles? Buy what you need. If you really feel you need all-wheel drive to get around, you know, that's totally up to you. But today's systems, truly, you're buying more technology, but there are more parts. There are more moving parts.
Anything that moves has a chance of breaking.
There's more. Those cars are generally more expensive because you're driving 2 extra wheels, so there's more parts involved. So the cost goes up. And at what cost is it? I mean, do you need it? And that's the point. You know, I think today people just can't drive as well because they don't drive. They drive. The cars are driving so much of that. The front wheel drive, the traction's better. They don't need to know about oversteer and understeer. They're not as good.
Yeah, but you know, you can't replace the lousy drivers we have. I don't care how many wheels are being driven by the car. If the car's being driven by an idiot, you still lose.
You can tell, no matter if they have.
Not much you
Hey,
can
how
do.
is it that the four-wheel drive cars are always the ones in the median getting stuck? You know, I got four-wheel drive on. Well, your contact patch is still this big.
Yeah, you see the guy in the big pickup truck blowing past you at 90 in the snowstorm because he
Slow
thinks
down.
he's invincible. Right. And then 5 minutes later, he's on the side of the road.
All right, Joe, give
Flip.
us some more automotive insight.
Okay, longer car car loans are on the rise. Go figure. I mean, cars are getting a little bit more expensive, but
A lot more expensive.
Car loans are getting longer. In some cases, 7 years. I think even perhaps even 8 years.
What about the 2-year 24 or 3-year 36?
Yeah, those are nobody can afford. That's a $1,500 a month payment.
Car payment. Yeah. Okay. Well.
26% of the loans are given out to subprime buyers today, which is up slightly.
Yeah. Remember, before the recession, you couldn't get a subprime
right.
loan.
Well, that's one of the reasons the car sales are up is they've loosened the credit allowance. If you have even fair credit today, but a decent payment history, they're going to put you in a new car.
Very important.
And that's okay as long as you pay for it. That's okay.
And just because your credit score is high doesn't mean you don't need a car too.
And so 20% of the new car loans are 6 years or longer today.
Wow.
20%.
Wow.
But on the other hand, John, today money is so cheap. You can borrow it. If you have a credit, you can get a car loan for 2%, or in some cases a little bit less than 2%. And so it's really, some people would suggest, well, why should I take money out? Maybe I have an investment.
If I can make 5 or 10%.
If I can make 5%, why am I going
costs
to take
me
money
too.
out I'll just borrow it at 1.99 over 6 or 7 years. The dilemma with that is if they want to sell a car in 3 or 4 years, they're probably underwater with the car because it's such a long spread out for the loan. And so, if you want to sell your car, you're going to have to come to the bank with some cash to get rid of your car.
That's very good.
And that happened a lot back years ago
gosh.
when so many people were upside down on their
Folks,
cars.
this is very important information to keep with you. Understand that when you get that longer loan, that's for a car you're going to want to have to keep, because when you don't, you won't have enough at the end of the vehicle's loans. You're trading it in and you still owe money. You might have to roll it into the next loan. You'll always be upside down. So make sure on those long loans that you're willing to keep that car.
And that's a good case. Maybe we can take a look at doing a show on the value of leasing versus buying, because when you're leasing, basically you're renting something just for the time you're using it, and at the end of the 2 years, as I have a lease that's due up in February, I will just hand the keys in. I've never put on a set of tires. I've never put on any brakes.
Bye-bye.
I've changed the oil in the car, and you're never upside down in it unless you go over your miles. Now, leasing's not good for everybody.
It's not.
So let's take a look at maybe doing a show
folks,
on
how about we do a show on do I lease or do I buy, and
we'll have some examples and see what works.
Because it doesn't work for everybody, but maybe it'll work for you. And also, folks, another thing we're not talking about here is the banking industry. The reason we weren't selling cars, they weren't giving subprime loans out, we can't sell cars. The reason why GM and Chrysler had to apply for the federal money is because the banks quit lending it to them. It was a common practice for automakers to finance their new models with the banks rather than use their capital. So they were going along like they were every year, and all of a sudden Wall Street crashes and Wall Street shuts off the money, and it forced GM and Chrysler into that. And the only reason Ford didn't go there is they mortgaged their future to the hilt, saw it coming, and they lucked out and squeaked through. So the banks are the ones that really are the ones at fault here. Sorry, Wall Street. It's usually you.
They've come a long way from when Henry, years ago, would require people to pay cash for their Model Ts. He didn't lend money.
No, he didn't like that.
He did later on.
He didn't like
He
that.
didn't want it. He was a cash guy.
Bad idea. All right, we'll close it here with something a little more fun, I think. And let's talk about value of your car when it's time for trade-in. Talk about color. When is something like black more important than green? And I don't mean the green you get when you sell in your car. I mean the color that you choose when you buy a car, folks, affects its resale value. You might not think it's true, but it actually is. Now, if you're in the market for a new car and you think, well, I'm going to get orange, I like this crazy color because it's cool, you may want to think twice about what selection you make. You may be thinking about not so much what looks good on you at this moment, but what will look good 3 years when you trade it in. That's because cars today with non-standard colors, the popular ones, we've talked about it on the show many times before, the black, white, silvers, those are the real popular colors. They actually have a lower used car trade-in value than cars that are more popular, white, the silver, the black. And it's actually costing you cash. For example, the trade-in value of a Chevy Cruze with emerald green paint, depending on which market you're in, can fetch $500 to $1,000 less than a more desirable color like a black or white or a silver Chevy Cruze. That's $1,000 out of your pocket. It's the same car, same condition. It's just that little oddball color.
How important was it to have that color?
Yeah. So think about to yourself. You love these colors. The colors are kind of trendy. How many of you still have the almond-colored dishwasher and refrigerator in your kitchen? You're living in the 70s. Remember the greens? Right. Stainless steel, they say now, may be going out because they want to change trends. So think about your car color before you buy, because it could wind up.
And it's not just that; it's also options.
Oh, yeah.
manual transmissions, certain options. Either will reduce
Technologies, you know, the CVTs that were once
There's
real
a lot
popular.
involved in making that decision, and it is a money decision.
That's why you watch Cars in Context. We'll help you through it. But listen, we're also going to talk you through something that we think is really important here. Being the Motor City, should Detroit be a destination city for our automotive heritage? And we'll tackle that little burning issue in Detroit right after this. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cars in Context. I'm your host, John Clor. Today, we've got an absolute killer topic. We've got a bunch of ideas, but we want to think about Detroit as the Motor City forever. We, as baby boomers, know our history, but does the rest of the world, even though they call us the Motor City, do they really appreciate the fact that the history, the seat of the automobile industry as we know it, is here? And what are we doing to leverage that to help the city of Detroit finance itself with having Detroit as a destination town, a destination city, much like, I don't know, Orlando and Disney World, or, you know, going to the Coke factory in Atlanta, or going to anywhere in the United States that has a great, you know, draw. I think Detroit has a lot to offer, and today we're going to talk to our favorite auto historian, Joe Babiasz. Joe, again, thanks. Welcome on the
John,
show.
good to see you again.
Joe, I think you started all this back when we were, Cars in Context was starting out on the old In a Heartbeat show. We had a wonderful show about the Packard plant, about all the rich heritage about the automobile industry growing up and becoming a world changer, a game changer, a life changer for everyone in the world when we put the world on wheels, and how Detroit has such fantastic heritage as the seat of this industry, is the place where it all grew up, and we've done nothing about the heritage. Now,
very little.
I don't want to disparage. First of all, we have probably the best museum in the world at the Henry Ford in Dearborn. It's got a wonderful automotive collection. It does trace the history of the automobile throughout North America and throughout the Detroit area, but it is not brand specific, and it is not take all the little pieces of the Detroit puzzle and present that. It is one place where, in that very spot where the museum was, is not necessarily the very spot where the birthplace of the automobile happened either. So let's go and talk about a sad thing that happened last year, Joe, and that was the closing of the Walter P. Chrysler Museum up in Auburn Hills. Folks, if you've never got up to the Walter P. Chrysler Museum, it was a beautiful, shining example of the wonderful contribution that the Chrysler Corporation, and under its various management and ownership, even under Daimler and now Fiat, the contribution it's made to not only the automobile industry, but to the war effort, many other things. And it was really a great place. I love that museum. I actually, when I was at Edmunds.com, I did a feature story on that when it first opened. I love that it's a beautiful place. downstairs was
stories.
being cool.
Y-
But
yes.
it went out of business. Why? Because what was it, Joe? Why would the Walter B. Chrysler Museum not garner that kind of attention? So to keep at least open a couple of days a week.
Yeah, I really don't know, John. I mean, one of the reasons maybe it's not in Detroit, it's in Auburn Hills, it's out in the sticks to some extent. You can't charge a lot of money to have people come into these wonderful museums. You have to get funding from somewhere, and of course the big three, they lost a lot of their funding. They just didn't have the money for this, and it was very sad to see it go. I was at the museum several times, and it was a great place to go. And I hope that they can find another way to do something in the future.
Yeah, I understand that it's still relatively intact, and if you want to rent a private party to go there or rent it out to go see it, it's still possible that you can do that. But folks, that's not the same as making it a destination place that's open to expose and sell Detroit. Part of it's marketing, part of it is being part of something else. Now we have the National Automotive Heritage area in Detroit, and there is right now, folks, there is an effort underfoot to start capitalizing on all the rich heritage we have. There are some people, they've started a nonprofit. We've brought you a show from one of those areas of their work, which was the Piquette plant.
Yeah, great
And
facility.
Nancy Darga, who has been running that operation for them. But there are a whole bunch of people now that are starting to think, wait a second, there's a lot more places to go. Joe, here's a picture of the old factory there, which you did a story for me a long time ago on FordRacing.com, your story about where the Highland Park plant.
Yep.
And that is really, Joe,
very historically
historic
important
place.
plant.
But Joe, what is going on now? If you look at it, it's still standing. What's going on there today?
Well, what you just saw, that's part of the plant that's currently being used, some of it for storage. They're renting it out. It's not owned by Ford, by the way. Ford doesn't own that building anymore. But it's being used for storage. It's much of its capacity is filled. But in front of that is the old, what's called the administration building, I think is what it's called. And there's an effort to purchase that building and turn it into an automotive museum, part of the automotive heritage area of Detroit. Now again, it's in Highland Park, technically not Detroit, but it would be a wonderful place, a stop-off place that would be added to the Piquette Museum, which again is a wonderful place. And I hope that they can get the funding. I know they're working hard at getting funding to purchase the building and make it a place to go to highlight the wonderful history we have of the automobile in Detroit.
What a great idea, Joe. What a great idea, folks, about having a building that was really when you think about the Model T, that was the automobile that put not only us but the rest of the world thinking into motion. The Model T put America on wheels.
And that was the plant that did it, because that's where the assembly line was perfected.
At
and they built as many as 9,000 Model Ts a day at that factory. Incredible amount of cars.
In that time of the year. Let's figure it this way. If they open a multi-mark facility there, you're walking into a place that's hallowed ground to a historian, an automotive buff. This is the seat, if you will, of the birthplace of the motor cars as we know it. And other companies could come in and show, that's such a big building, Joe. And if they could do this, it would be a destination where was the auto industry born? It was Detroit, and where in Detroit should I go? That doesn't just tell, it tells the story of some of the famous marks that are still there. Chrysler, GM, and Ford could all come in. But speaking of that, let's talk about another difficulty that I have with some of the museums that are around town, and that is, the GM folks they've saved their history, for the most part. And there's a building up, what is it, Joe, in Sterling Heights?
Yeah, on Mountain Road and about 15-mile road called the GM Heritage Center.
Oh, it's a Heritage Center. That Heritage Center is not open to the public. Folks, wouldn't it be great if either they could open that or bring that to this building too?
Yeah,
or what about, folks, here's a killer, Joe, what about the Packard plant?
Yeah, the gentleman from Peru is buying the place, and he loves the old architecture, wants to save as much of it as he can, and maybe he can save a little corner of it for a museum. And what a better museum than to go to the Packard plant.
To rise it from the ashes, and here's the old building the way it looks now on the boulevard there near Mount Elliott.
But they say a lot of the building structurally is sound. Surprising that they say that, but it is sound.
Look at it, yeah.
And he wants to keep as much as he can. So I wish him well, and yeah, I would love to. But there are other buildings. There's the old Fisher Body building on Piquette that's almost across from the Piquette Museum, the Ford Museum right now. That's just sitting empty.
Right.
That would be more than five or six stories. There are a lot of these old car-related buildings still there, empty, sitting in Detroit. Could be a wonderful museum.
Folks, I really think that it's time to write your congressman. It's time to support this foundation that's going through right now with our National Automotive Heritage area. To maybe we put a bus tour together, maybe even one idea would be We have something like the Automotive Hall of Fame, which is really being underutilized. Maybe, Joe and you and I should come back and do another show about how car companies can use a museum as a pickup place, much like the Corvette plant. You can go build your engine, watch your car getting built, and go pick it up over at the Corvette Museum right next door. There's a real value in that, and Detroit could be a destination in the future.
Love to see it.
We'll do that. We'll do that show sometime. Well, Joe, believe it or not, that was a great topic. I love it. I think we've got some ideas started, but you know, this is the time for one of my favorite parts of the show.
And what is it?
It's called Pride of My Ride.
There you go.
Folks, this is the time when you send me a picture of your car, and then we put it on the air, and we tell you other people why you have pride in your ride. And today I've got a wonderful Pride in My Ride example. It comes from someone that I got to know at a car show down in Florida. And this Pride in My Ride comes to us from Ron and Helena Semler. They live in
New Jersey.
Yeah, you're right, Mount Laurel,
down
New Jersey. Ron and Helena, I met this picture of their 1996 SVT Mustang Cobra Mystic Coupe. Mystic is the special name of a special paint used on this car, which was only 2,000 of these cars were produced. It has refractive paint technology.
Is it the flip paint?
Yeah, it's the flip paint. Now, right now you're looking at it, and I think in this picture it looks kind of purpley, but if you stood in front of it and looked in offset sunlight, it would be green. And if you saw with sunlight from behind you, it would look root beer brown. You can get up to 7 colors looking at this car.
Wow.
They have one of 2,000 coupes. They showed it there at the Mustang Club of America's Grand Nationals. They're at the Mustangs at the Mick Yard, which was the racetrack they have down at Disney World. Ron and Helena also purchased my 1978 King Cobra Mustang from me and brought it back to New Jersey when I sold that car last year. They're wonderful, wonderful
Wow,
car
that's
collectors. They watch Cars in Context on our YouTube channel, Cars in Context TV on YouTube. Thank you, Ron and Helena, for sending that in. Folks, if you want Car and Pride in My Ride, send it to me, J. Clor, carsincontext.com, and we'll be sure to put it on the air. But you know, there's even more. We need to know from Lauren Parrott. Lauren, is it possible we have reader and viewer mail for Cars in Context?
John, you have it every single time.
We do again?
That would mean
Lauren,
we actually have viewers.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you, Lauren, for bringing this in. Viewer mail. I can't believe it, Joe, but you've got one just for yourself. Why don't you take that one?
This one comes from Alan A. in Grosse Pointe Woods, who watches Cars in Context on Comcast Cable Channel 915.
Ooh, that means you're HD.
Yeah, that means we even look uglier.
Hey, wait a minute.
Dear Joe, I love the show you guys did from Ypsilanti. I loved going
Oh,
there.
yeah, the Ypsilanti show.
Would love to see more remote shows from some of the other cool car places in and around Detroit. Do you think you'll ever consider doing a show a bit farther away? Have you ever thought of the Sloan Museum in Flint or the Gilmore around Kalamazoo? We have talked about that. You know, Flint would be a great. There's actually the Sloan Museum, but there's also a small one right across the street, a Buick, where they actually they do the restoration on some of the cars. And I've been in that place. It'd be a wonderful addition to Sloan. We've talked about Gilmore. I've been there. It's a great facility. A bit farther away.
There are some other ones, Joe. Oh, okay, Alan, I appreciate that question. That was a good one.
Love to do it.
There are other ones, and we'll talk to Lauren and Jeremy and Kermit and see if the gang wants to. I think so.
Yeah.
Thanks for throwing that in there. We will do those shows, and we'll try to include Gilmore. It's a great place, but I'm not sure if we can get out there, but we'll give it a shot.
Okay.
Hey, thank you very much for that. I've got one, too, thanks to Lauren. This one comes to us from Bill R. in Harper Woods, who watches Cars in Context on AT&T Uverse Channel 99. Listen, it says, Dear John, with all the bad weather we've been having recently, you know, we're taping this during the winter, would you guys ever reconsider running the winter car care show that you did last year? In fact, I did that with Joe Babiasz. We did the winter car care show, remember
We
that?
did, yeah.
Very good show. The teenage drivers in my house could use a refresher on. Now I don't know, Bill, if that means one of the teenage drivers in your house have gotten into an accident in one of the recent snowstorms we had. Maybe that's possible. But yes, there is car care. Sometimes the condition of your car affects how you're able to drive it in the winter.
That's true. That
Sometimes
could be
when
like headlamps that are fogged over and you can't see
bad
at night.
wipers, tires that go down.
It's another show, John. It's another show.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll ask Lauren and Jeremy and Kermit if we can rerun the car care show for this winter, and we'll come back. We have a lot more on car care and how really it does affect. It affects winter driving, summer driving, but in the winter, I think winter's tougher on cars any way you look at it, Joe. Yeah, folks, that's a really good question. We do. If you look back, go to carsincontext.com. Check out the schedule on Cars in Context TV and scroll down to that. You'll see some of the older shows that you can watch any of those older shows on Cars in Context TV on the YouTube channel, or you'll see that a couple of times we've rerun some of those shows that stay evergreen, and that's a show, Joe, I think we'll have to do again. But thanks for that question, Bill. Hope that answers. And if you have a question for us here on Cars in Context, send it to me, jclor@carsincontext.com, and we'll make sure it gets to the War Memorial, that Lauren will bring it out, we'll put it on the air, and get your question answered. Joe, again, thanks for that great show again.
My pleasure, John. Good to see
As
you
it always
again.
happens, doing a show here at WMTV at Cars in Context just brings us to many more shows, ideas. We want Detroit to be a destination place, and we are the Motor City, and we want to celebrate that and actually benefit from that. Folks, thanks for watching again. Remember, until next time, knowledge is power. I'm your host, John Clor.